I am Caitlin Giles McCormick here from the NJEDA. Want to welcome and thank you for joining us for the Food Security Planning Grant Overview session today. I am going to shift over to our main host for today, Rusha Gadre, the Senior Advisor for Food Security and Innovation. Rusha?
Thank you, Caitlin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us for this meeting today, for the webinar today, to go over the Food Security Planning Grant. We'll be digging a little bit deeper into what the planning grant is about and who's eligible and when does the application start and how you can successfully complete an application. You'll be hearing a lot from me much later in the presentation, but I would want to welcome Tara Colton, who's the Executive Vice President for Economic Security at EDA. Tara.
Thanks, Rucha. Thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. As Rucha said, really excited that you're here. Knowing that for some of you who are participating, this may be very familiar terrain, engaging with the New Jersey EDA. For some of you, this may be the first time you've heard of us. And for many of you, hopefully somewhere in between. We are excited to be presenting about this tool and resource that we've developed that is going to continue to build on Governor Murphy's commitment to a stronger and fairer New Jersey. So just a quick run through of what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to give you a quick overview about the goal of this program and then the background and context, but we're going to be spending the lion's share of today's session quite deep in the details about the Food Security Planning Grant application and the process to apply. One thing I want to emphasize from the outset, this is not a first come, first served application. The application is open until November 25th. So you have quite a bit of time to prepare materials and submit your application. There's no advantage if you submit it tomorrow versus a month from tomorrow, as long as it's before that deadline. So we really want to encourage you to take the time to review all the resources and then work at your local community level to develop the proposal and scope that you want to submit for consideration. So just who you're going to be hearing from today, myself, Emily Apple, who is our Director for Economic Security here at the New Jersey EDA, and then Rucha Gadre, who has been the champion and architect of this product, and we're really excited to have her go into many of the details with you. Next slide. So just as a little context, the portfolio of programs that I'm privileged to help lead here at the EDA are focused on what we call economic security. And it's a number of initiatives that are not traditionally thought of when you think of economic development. We're very proud to be changing that narrative and changing that paradigm. You're going to be hearing, obviously, in great detail about this planning grant, but also wanted to emphasize that we have other programs and products to support food security and reduce and alleviate hunger and food deserts throughout New Jersey, including our Food Desert Relief Act, the Sustain and Serve New Jersey program, where we purchase meals in bulk from restaurants via grants to nonprofits. It's something Governor Murphy always calls a win-win-win, as the meals are given out for free to New Jerseyans in need, and we're on track to purchase 5 million meals by early next year, really a staggering number. We also just wanted to put on your radar while we have you that we are developing a number of programs to support childcare providers. So if this is an area of focus in your local community, please know that the EDA is making grants available for childcare providers, and there's a lot more information on our website about that. Excited to help spread the message about that as well. But I guess the theme I wanted to emphasize is this is not your traditional economic development portfolio, and we're excited to be expanding that definition even further. Next slide. One more, please. Great. So just I'm going to quickly go over this and then turn it over to Emily. So just as context, I mentioned the Food Desert Relief Act. This is part of a package of legislation that Governor Murphy signed into law last year that creates about 15 programs to foster economic growth and help to transform New Jersey's economy. But half of those programs are revised and improved and strengthened versions of programs that EDA already offered. And then about half of them are brand new, including the Food Desert Relief Act. And we're very proud to be developing a number of initiatives, as well as the regulatory framework that will govern this program. I mentioned our Sustain and Serve New Jersey program. The governor says this, like I said, is a win-win. Sometimes he says win-win-win. Sometimes he says grand slam or home run. I've been getting some grief from my colleagues because I called it the Aaron Judge of food security programs, but he just hit 61 home runs. So I think as a Yankees fan, I think I'm allowed to say that. And then what we recognize too is that as we are building out these programs, there's not one solution, there's not one challenge, and that at its heart, we want to be keeping communities at the center and having the solutions that are developed be really responsive and reflective of local community needs, assets, and challenges. And so we're excited to be rolling out the Food Security Planning Grant to do exactly that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily to give some context, and then Rucha is going to be the star of the show for the rest of the webinar.
Thanks so much, Tara. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Apple. I'm Director for Economic Security here at NJEDA. Just to take you through a little bit of context as to how we got here. I know you're all excited to hear about the meat of the program, and Rucha is going to spend a lot of time talking through that. But for now, just to talk through a little bit more about the Food Desert Relief Act and some of the goals within it. As Tara mentioned, it is part of the Economic Recovery Act of 2020 that was signed into law by Governor Murphy in January 2021. And within the Food Desert Relief Act, there are a number of overarching goals and strategies that EDA can implement in order to improve food security and work with communities to address hunger. So first of these is the ability to facilitate development and operation of new grocery stores within food desert communities. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what a food desert community is. Through the provision of tax credits for both the development and operation of new supermarkets within these communities. But we recognize that while supermarkets are a critical part of the solution to addressing food access, it's not the only solution. So the law also authorizes EDA to be able to sell those tax credits and then be able to do a lot of different grant, loan, and technical assistance programs that are going to do things, that recognize the strength of the existing retailers in those communities, not just focusing on new, and be able to enable particularly smaller retailers to be able to provide things like fresh and healthy produce, and may just need to purchase a refrigerator in order to be able to do so. Being able to address the tremendous shift we've seen over the pandemic that was already underway, but was so exacerbated by COVID, toward e-commerce in the grocery space, and thinking about not just how do we actually bring a new store to people, but how do we leverage existing stores and help them be more nimble and think about delivery in different ways, particularly to individuals who use different federal nutrition assistance programs like SNAP and WIC, to make sure that you can use your EBT card in the same way you can use your credit card. And then finally, we have the ability to, and this sort of goes toward what we're trying to do with the planning grant, identifying and fostering innovative solutions, community-driven solutions, to be able to alleviate food insecurity in a way that's contextualized to the community and comes from the community. So I mentioned that the law is for development and operation of supermarkets in food desert communities. We're focused on food desert communities. This is a unique definition that was directed by the Food Desert Relief Act that EDA had to work with our partners at Department of Community Affairs, Department of Agriculture, to define what is a food desert community in New Jersey. There are obviously lots of definitions across the country, including at the US Department of Agriculture, as to what food deserts are, but they don't really totally hit the mark for the unique context of New Jersey and our density and the diversity of suburban, urban, rural communities. So alongside our partners at Department of Agriculture, Department of Community Affairs, we developed this index to be able to measure food desert communities in the state that took into account over 40 factors. And we combined this with a lot of on-the-ground community feedback, so both through requests for information that we issued a couple years ago, as well as through community listening sessions earlier this year to get feedback on draft designations. So this includes things not only that are limited to the food retail environment, although that's critical, not just does your community have a supermarket, yes, no, but also looking at what are the other types of food available. We have something called a food swamp, which is, there may be food there, but either there's no fresh food available, or there's a lot of fast food, a lot of liquor stores, things that aren't increasing access to healthy, nutritious foods. Also looking at the demographics of community, looking at economic factors, looking at benefits enrollment, making sure that people actually have the ability to afford food through those federal nutrition programs, looking at the health of communities, as well as community level factors with things like household cost burden, which may not seem intuitive in an index about food insecurity, but one of the things that we hear from so many folks who are on the ground is that rent eats first. So if you are already a cost burdened household, it is going to be difficult for you to afford that fresh, healthy, nutritious food that we want to be able to provide access to. So holistically, we took all of these factors into account in order to designate 50 food desert communities in the state. And you'll see them listed here. They're also available on our website if one of our team wants to put that link in the chat. We have 50 food desert communities. Some of these are combined municipalities. So you can have multiple municipalities in a single food desert community, or you can have one municipality subdivided into multiple food desert communities. In most cases, a municipality in and of itself is not wholly a food desert. So I encourage you to both look at this list and then look at our mapping tool that is also available on our website to see if your, certain locations within your municipality are in fact within this food desert community designation, because it is quite prescriptive in terms of the borders of the food desert community in many cases. And that will matter for our food security planning grant program, which I'm now going to turn it over to Rucha Gadre to get into and talk much more about.
Thank you, Tara and Emily, for providing the context to, what our team here at EDA is focused on, giving access to basic necessities such as childcare, access to healthy, nutritious food, improving food access, is a crucial tool in ensuring that communities can thrive. So coming to now focusing on the food security planning grant, here's a quick overview of what the planning grant is intended for. It is the authority's first pilot initiative that's solely focused on improving food access and food security within the state of New Jersey, primarily in the 50 food desert communities. Please keep in mind that this is a competitive planning grant, and it will be asking each applicant to leverage a distressed asset to improve food access within the community. And then I know most of you are aware that EDA has had many grant programs in place and continues to have those. This is, again, a competitive planning grant. It is not first come, first serve. So we have to keep in mind that applications are submitted during the open application window, and then they'll be evaluated for completeness, and the ones that score the highest will be the ones selected for the award. Next slide, please. So what is a planning grant? A planning grant is a well-supported document which brings an idea into existence. So what we're looking for specifically is that, what is the problem that you are wanting to address, and how detailed can you go into planning and showing, if we take these steps, if we continue taking these certain steps, we might be able to address the solution. So it needs to be innovative and propose exciting projects. Please keep in mind that if you have an idea that is already being implemented but can be bettered, we would also want to see those plans. It needs to incorporate the authority's food security objectives and must be organized in a well manner. It needs to show that you have taken the community needs into consideration and are involving the community in designing this plan. We want a genuine collaboration between the individuals who face the challenges of food insecurity in addressing, in prioritizing and then figuring out what are the best options to consider and then work on. It needs to be well thought through, well prepared, and provide a detailed narrative. It's very important to keep in mind that when you're looking at an idea, if you follow the SMART objectives, it kind of gives you what you need to start and how well can those ideas and plans steps be implemented in a timely manner to make sure that the goal of your objective is achieved. And then, as most of the programs goes, there are some very specific objectives and requirements that any grant program has. We want to make sure that you keep in mind that while this allows you to think outside the box, there are some very specific application requirements which must be met. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, this planning grant wants you to leverage a distressed asset within the community. So what is a distressed asset? A distressed asset for this planning grant can be defined as a commercial building or a series of buildings, its attachment or appurtenances, or even a vacant plot of land that, if put to good use, can actually be very helpful in addressing food insecurity and improving food access. Please keep in mind that the distressed asset should be distressed or vacant or partially vacant for at least 1 year and can be leveraged to improve food security. Here are just some images, but you can certainly get creative about thinking, could you use a warehouse? Could you use just open green space? Or is there a storefront that hasn't been in business, and how do we bring business back in the community that's focused on improving food security? So there are many ideas and options to consider, and we just want you to be very thoughtful and collaborate with your community residents to understand their needs and how best you can leverage that asset to meet their needs. Next slide. Now focusing on something that's very technical and a requirement for this application, the entity pool for this phase of application who can apply are the municipal governments, the county governments, and the redevelopment agencies. Please bear in mind that if a non-government entity wants to apply, that application cannot be considered for this program. If your proposal is leveraging a distressed asset that is outside of the food desert community, then it wouldn't qualify for this grant program. To find out more about, to identify and figure out if that distressed asset falls within a food desert community, you can always use the map that we have on our website, on the program website, and then put more resources into your idea and then begin the work. Also, please note that if the property that you're considering is owned by the state, we will not be accepting application for that distressed asset. Next slide. So what are some eligible uses of this grant program? The planning grant, as mentioned earlier, will support the development of an action plan that's focused on improving food access by leveraging a distressed asset within that food desert community. Here are just a few examples, but certainly, we are open to learning more from you all and figuring out what are the needs today in our food desert communities in improving food access. So some are just looking at, identifying and developing a community-based initiative or a program that can address the needs, determining the cost effect of retrofitting or re-greening a property as it relates to food access, creating ways to grow, process, and sell fresh produce, or even thinking about, if there used to be a grocery store in that community, but it no longer exists, can we bring back another grocer in that community? And so run a feasibility study to see what's the best solution to leverage that distressed asset and improve the needs of our community. Next slide. So coming back to some other technical aspects of this grant program, EDA has up to $1.5 million that are dedicated for this program. The grant amount range from $75,000 to $125,000. And how much an entity gets is based on the food desert community's composite food desert score. Now, the composite food desert score is a very technical term, and I could read you the definition, but it's best if you look at the methodology that we developed to get to that score and also the designation, and it can be found on our website. So here's, as you can see on this slide, here's a breakdown based on the community's food desert factor score, how are they ranked, and then what award amount the entity would be eligible for. Please keep in mind that we have a limited pool of funding, and so we will be awarding no more than one award per food desert community. So for example, if in a food desert community X, the municipality applies for a distressed property within that food desert community, and the county also comes back and says, in that similar food desert community, there's another distressed asset and applies for that, we would want to consider one. So it's one award for food desert community. In the event that we have fewer applications and we've met all the requirements of the program as laid out in the board approved memo, we would go back and reconsider some applications. And in that instance, if we have additional funds, we would go back and say, we didn't have enough applications, we've met all the requirements, we have some money left. Do we want to go back and consider some applications that came in for the same food desert community? Next slide. I know I keep on saying that we're going to get into the technical aspect of the program, but here on forward, it is the extreme technical aspect of the program, but a very crucial one because it talks about the application itself. So the application was launched on September 27th. It can be found on our program website. This webinar will be accessible to you all, so you'll have all the links to the information that we have been referring to. The application window is for 60 days, so it closes on November 25th at 5 p.m. Again, this is a competitive program, so keep in mind that just because you got in an application between those 60 days doesn't mean that you are automatically eligible for the funding amount. We will have to ensure that your application meets all the requirements, all the supporting documents are submitted. It will be evaluated by an internal scoring committee, and applications that receive anywhere between 55 to 100, so a minimum of 55 points is necessary. For applications that score above that, that's when we would be focusing thoroughly on, studying the proposed plan and then scoring them and then making sure that the ones that score the highest are the ones who receive the award. Again, all this information is readily available on different supporting documents that we've uploaded for this specific grant program. Next slide. So what would we be looking for when it comes to the completeness of an application? First and foremost, that you're an entity that has been deemed eligible for this grant application. So municipality, county, or redevelopment agency applying for it. You are leveraging a distressed asset within the food desert community, not outside the boundaries of the food desert communities. And you can identify those by looking at our map. And then you have proposed an idea that you want to convert into an actionable plan that kind of ties what our intentions are and our eligibility criteria are. So basically improving food access and food security as prioritized by the community. The timeline, a detailed timeline of the activities that you're proposing is necessary in your in the plan that you submit to us or the proposal that you submit to us. This is a 9-month grant program with the possibility of receiving an extension of 3 months. So either complete the plan that you've proposed in 9 months, or you can complete it in 12 months, provided you've asked for an extension. And you need to identify very clearly what are some of the resources that you will need in order to successfully complete the plan. We're asking you to provide us a budget. So once you start the application, you'll know what your food desert community's composite score is and what the grant amount you're eligible for is. So make sure that, based on the amount that you're eligible for, you provide us a budget. However, in an instance, for example, if your community receives a grant of eligible to receive a grant of $75,000, and if there is a gap in what you think the program is going to need, just provide us with that budget so we understand, how are you going to be meeting those gaps with the funding that you have, and then additional funding you'll have to figure out a way of making sure that your plan is complete and it matches the budget requirements that you have. Most crucial part of this application is the letter of support. We need a letter of support from the office of the mayor or the chief executive of the municipality that you're applying for, from a letter from the community stakeholders within the food desert community. So we know that you've engaged your stakeholders in figuring out, what the needs are and how they're going to be addressed, which distressed asset is being leveraged, and certainly a letter of support from the property owner. Next slide. Again, it is a competitive planning grant program, so the applications will be scored. Here's a quick snapshot of how we'll be prioritizing the application scoring. More detailed information on this is available in our program specification document, which is also accessible on our program page. So please visit that. And if you have any questions, you can always email us on the email address that we'll provide you at the end of this webinar. Next question, next slide. Application fee. It's a standard process here at EDA to have a non-refundable application fee of $1,000, which must be completed and submitted at the time of the application, unless the applicant is asking for or requesting a fee waiver. Fees can be paid in the traditional way, which is either through a check or a credit card. We prefer that you use a credit card because it's easier for us to make sure that your application is completed and then move on to the next step. Please be advised, if you are sending a check, we need to confirm that the funds have been deposited and only then begin the application process. And then again, the fee structure is $1,000 non-refundable. It is necessary to be provided at the time of application unless you request a fee waiver. Next slide. As I mentioned, we were able to seek fee waiver for municipalities that are ranked in the top 10% of the 2020 Municipal Revitalization Index. So if you are a municipal entity applying for a food desert community and you fall within that 10%, you can request a fee waiver. We'll verify to make sure that you've selected the correct municipality and it matches, and then we can provide you a fee waiver. You can access the list of the municipalities, the 2020 MRI index, and the link that's provided here, as well as available on our program page. Next slide. So here are some resources that are very important for the planning grant. The application checklist. Once you start an application, it's not that you have to complete it on the same day. You can, complete the application within that 60-day window. But before you start an application, please look through the application checklist so you understand what are the requirements that the Food Security Planning Grant Program has, so that you are prepared to get them, for example, a letter of support from the stakeholders. Have you engaged your stakeholders? That might take some time. Once you've had multiple conversations, you need to have a letter from them saying that they support the plan that you want to propose. So there's a list of things that we've highlighted in the application checklist that you want to look at before you begin the application process. We also have a frequently asked questions document uploaded on our website currently. But again, based on the feedback that we get, the questions that we get, this document will be updated periodically. So always keep an eye out on what questions have been added. You can always email us if you have additional questions, and we'll do our best to either put them in the FAQ document or respond to your email. There's a program specification, which, as mentioned earlier, is a detailed look at how the program came into existence. What are we looking at? The scoring criteria, the objectives, all of those documents. And then the designation, which was a part of the Food Desert Relief Act, and the designation, we designated the 50 food desert communities in February of this year, 2021, and then we still have, information that is relevant for you to look at when you're thinking about the scoring, how did we tier the grant amount, and so on and so forth. So please do look at that. The 2020 MRI index is important for the fee waivers. The food desert map is important so that you know your distressed asset, whether it falls within the the boundaries of the food desert community or not. There's also a sample application, so you can print it out and you can just go through it before actually filling out the application. And then the standard forms that EDA requires, which are the religious affiliation form, the legal questionnaire, and the certificate of non-involvement in prohibited activities in Russia and Belarus. Next slide. Here's the next few slides are a snapshot of how you would begin the application process. It will be very helpful for you to keep this on hand when you begin your application. If I don't know how many of you have already taken a look at it, but this is a crucial step in making sure that your application comes in and we receive it. Next slide. This is the landing page of the Food Security Planning Grant. It clearly states the objective of the planning grant and what we are looking for. All of these pages will have live links to the reference document. And so you can, at any time during the application process, if you feel like you need to refer back to an information, you can always click on those live links. It takes you back either to the food desert ranking, the methodology, the map, whatever it may be. Next slide. So again, here is a snapshot of what happens once you've decided that you want to apply and what amount you would be eligible for. So food desert communities with a composite food desert factor score between 86.5 to 63.9 are eligible for $125,000. So these are the communities that are most food deserty, and I know food deserty is not a term, but they are most in need. And so again, the methodology behind ranking is how we came up with the food desert factor score and the amount that these communities would receive in planning. The next is and communities that have a score of 61.2 to 51.5 will receive a grant amount up to $100,000, and then 51 food desert factor score of communities between 51.2 and 24.1 are eligible to receive an award of $75,000. Again, just because you send in an application doesn't mean you're automatically eligible for receiving the funding. It's a competitive program, so we score those applications and then announce the awardees. Again, as I mentioned earlier, in the application, if you need to access any live links, it'll either say click here, or there'll just be highlighted terminology like food desert factor score. So you can access that information by clicking on it. There are questions that are related to, how would you do this? Why you want to do this, which are very narrative in their form. And so what we are requesting you all is, you can print out the sample application because you'll have the questions in front of you. Start answering those questions in a Word document, and as you finish answering each section or each question within a section, PDF that Word document and upload that as your attachment or answer to that question. If you have any questions now during the application, please do not hesitate to email us. The email is fooddesertrelief@njeda.com. Next slide. So once you go on the web page and you see that little button that says apply here, it brings you to this specific page that you're seeing in front of you, which is the application center sign-in page. Like any new website that you go to and you try to register yourself to create an account, it's the same principle. It's just EDA's portal. So you may have an account if you've applied for some other grants in the past. So if you have that information, it's all easy breezy for you. You can just follow the next steps. But if you're new, here's a snapshot of what you will be doing. So click on the register here. Put in your username and password. If you've forgotten your password, there's an option to retrieve your password again. So it's very simple and easy to follow. Next step. How to register your email address. Enter your email username, and this can be same as your email. You don't have to create a new email for us, and then your password. Once the information is filled in, click register. The best way to ensure that it's easy moving forward is to write down that password. It obviously not in a very open space, but just figure out a way of saving that password somewhere so that when you come back in the future to complete the application, you've not lost it and you can just easily find it and access it. Next slide. Once, if your email is recognized by the application portal, this is what you'll be seeing. It'll say, just go ahead and register and then click the next button. So it's very intuitive and it's easy to follow. Next slide. If if you've forgotten or if you don't have one, these are the steps you would have to follow. So it says click send an invitation to your email, and then you get an invitation code sent to your email that you've used for registering. Go to your inbox, click on the email, and then make sure that oftentimes, and this has happened even with me when I was practicing this application, that it went to my spam folder. So just check that folder before you try to resubmit the request to go back and get the invitation code. In that email will be a link that will bring you back to the portal where you can register. Once you're back on that registration page, just click register, and then it brings you back to the fourth box in here where you fill in your information and click register to complete the application process. So two ways: you may have an application, you may have an account, and so it's easy, just username and password, and then you're into the application portal. If you're new, you register yourself, you get the invitation code, and then you click on that email, and then it brings you into the next page, which is where you put in your username, password, and you get into the application portal. Next slide. Setting up an applicant profile. This is primarily for new applicants, entities who are registering with us. So basically, it's asking simple questions like your email, your first name, last name, your email, your organization's name. If you have a website, you can enter that information in. If anything, if you are a returning user and if anything's changed on your end, just update that information. It's easier for us to get in touch with you, whether it's regarding your application or just general information that we would want to send out. Next page. Once your information is complete, you will need to confirm it through the email. So we'll send an automatic email comes back to you. Click it. Says confirm email. An email will be sent to the email address that you've listed, and then once you get that, go back, click confirm, and then that's the end of just the registration process. Next slide. If you are having issues creating a username or password, or you're not able to get that invitation code, or just general tech issues, please call our customer service. We are here to help. We want to make sure that we get you the support you need to get your application in a timely manner. Next slide. Once you're in the application portal, which is like the key page of this application process, you'll see food security planning grants listed in among all the other programs that are available or currently open at EDA. The planning grant is only for food securities, and this is only for municipalities, counties, and redevelopment agencies. So if you're anyone else listening to this this webinar today, please keep in mind that before you go into our grant portal, that you've reviewed the program specifications so that you're applying for the right grant. Click on the food security planning grant button, and that's when your application actually begins. Next slide. Here's a recap again on our welcome page stating what the food security planning grant is about. What are we looking for? Giving you, just highlighting a few examples that we are hoping to get from you about the planning grant, and then you say create. Next slide. The first page is where you put in your information. The entity type, it's a drop down. You would want to pick government entities. Please keep in mind, it's again only New Jersey municipal government, county government, or redevelopment agencies who are eligible for this grant. Entities that are the ones that are in that drop-down menu, but not government entities, are not eligible for this planning grant. Please be sure to provide us with your mailing address, a phone number, and an email so that if we need to get in touch with you, we have the right information. Next slide. Authorized representative. If you have somebody on your staff who's going to be completing the application for you, we need that individual's information to be put in to the application as well. So this is the page where you'll be doing that. Next slide. Tax clearance certificate. This is a requirement of EDA. And then we have directions as to how government entities can secure a tax clearance certificate. It is not a requirement at the time of the application. We would require it from entities that are eligible for or approved for the planning grant to submit it at the time of closing. If you can, within 60 days, secure one, we encourage you to do that. It's at no cost, and you can get the directions on how to access the application by following the link that's in the application checklist, as well as information that's provided here. Next slide. And then here we, the religious, as mentioned, there are 3 forms that are a standard requirement of EDA. You can get that information here for the religious affiliation form. You fill out the information, and then we get the information in our end and we process it. Next slide. Project details. When you come onto this page, we want you to give a name to your project. It could be Food Access Improvement, Municipality X, or County X, or Redevelopment Agency X. It's up to you. You can name it the way you want it. Project site address. This is important because this is where the distressed asset is located. So we need this information from you. If you have the wrong address, and if it happens to fall outside the boundaries of the food desert communities, the project gets disqualified. Then we have the factor score where the food desert communities or the distressed asset is located. So it self-fills out this information once you self-populates the information on the factor score once you pick which food desert community you're applying for. And then the last question on this slide is, or the application page is, to list any other entities that are participating with you on this grant program, which means that if you are working with a nonprofit, a local community, a food advocacy group, you can list them here. So we understand that this is, a collaboration project between you and other stakeholders addressing food security. Next slide. Project documentations. This is what I was talking about earlier, when you should, if possible, print out the application, look at the questions we are asking. Simply like a question and answer format, type out the answers in a Word document, PDF them, and upload them. These are all required documents. Any information that's missing or not correctly provided in here only makes it harder for us to score the application. To receive the most points, please give us as much as information as you can that's relevant to the distressed asset and the community's food needs. This is primarily just talking about the distressed asset itself, like what was it, how big is it, who owns it, and so on and so forth. Next slide. In here, this is the plan description or program, the project specification or statement of work. The meat of the substance needs to be in this application, needs to be in this section of the Q&A, questions in the application, which is a narrative as to, how is this property going to improve food security? What is the intended use, and how will the money help you design the plan? So this is a section that also has higher scoring in the entire application. So please think about, how you want to address or improve food access and food security for your community, and provide us with that information in this section. Again, you will have to upload files that are in PDF format. If you don't answer a question, it only counts against your scoring. Next slide. The work plan, which is primarily saying, you leveraging the SMART goals. What is your plan all about? Is it specific? Can we measure it? Is it achievable to complete the planning process in 9 months, or if you've requested an extension in 12 months? Is it time bound? Like, we want to make sure that you're not proposing something that's not feasible or cannot be achieved between the 9 or 12-month planning grant program. We want to know who's working on this planning grant, whether it's individuals in your office, or are you partnering with others, and how are you working, and who's working on what. So please include that. If you're working with someone else on this project, it can count as an in-kind donation or an in-kind match for your planning grant program. Next slide. your organization's capacity. Just give us a quick and a very intentional answer that says, does this kind of the work that you're going to be doing with the planning grant, like how does it relate to your organization? How does it align with your vision and mission in terms of improving the food security and food access? If you are entering into a partnership with someone for this application, please describe the nature of that partnership, whether they'll be the ones, the entities that you're working with, will they be the one primarily carrying the work with support from you or vice versa? So we want to understand, where you're coming from, why does this matter to you? How are you going to ensure that this is a successful planning grant on your end? Please upload the files, in PDF format, answer all the sub questions in each of the sections, because we want to learn more about how you'll be planning, how you will be operating this grant on your end. So we have a clear vision of what we will be scoring on. Next slide. Community engagement. As mentioned earlier, this is a planning grant program that is going to require each applicant to work with the individuals who are closest to the challenge of food access and food security, which means your community stakeholders. So we do require you to, carry on a community stakeholder engagement process, whether it's staff from within your office or whoever you're partnering with does the engagement process. It doesn't matter, as long as we know what you've done. You've narrated the steps that you've taken into engaging the community, what has come out of those, for example, focus group discussions. We want to read them in your application. Please upload the file on the PDF document on what has been done in terms of community engagement, and also keep in mind the letter of support stating the community's support in the plan that you want to propose to us is a necessity for the planning grant program. Next slide. The section 6 is where all the crucial required documents from the planning grant, letter of support that are required for the planning grant are located. Again, these must be PDF and uploaded. We need a letter of support from the Office of the Mayor or the Chief Executive of the municipality where the distressed asset is located. Letter of support from the stakeholders, which obviously you'll get through the community engagement process for that food desert community. And also a letter of support from the owner of the property. So this could be whether the property is owned by New Jersey County or if it's owned by a private individual. So based on which property you're looking at, we would need a letter of support from the owner. These can be uploaded here. Just scan them, PDF them, and just upload the file. Next slide. Budget. We do require that your budget includes a 20% matching contribution, and this matching contribution can just be an in-kind contribution from your office, from the partners that you're collaborating with. We're not going to be very prescriptive on how that matching contribution is added to your budget, but this is where you would, create a sample budget for $100,000 with a 20% match from whoever. We don't have a template for the budget. It's not something that we will follow up with you in terms of 6 months into the planning grant, like how many dollars of the planning grant have you expended. So we just want to see what the award that you're eligible for, how is that being used, whether it's staff time, whether it's getting a third-party consultant to do a feasibility study, whatever it may be. Just give us a very high-level breakdown of the budget, but please make sure that you include the 20% matching contribution. Next slide. The next few are very standard to any EDA application, which is, as you can see here, it's ownership of materials and event participation, which means that once you've provided us with your plan and we've approved the grant application, it means that the authority, for the purpose of making results publicly available to foster a dynamic discussion, can share those materials with others as well. So it's a standard practice. It's not something just specific to this planning grant. Next slide. We have a D&I section included. It's a part of any application that EDA will have moving forward, with the option in here specifically, either you can choose to answer or choose not to answer. If you choose not to answer, there's a prefer not to answer option. You will have to click through all the questions to make sure that it allows you to successfully submit your application. Next slide. The legal questionnaire, it's an extensive list of questions that EDA requires each applicant to apply. If you are having your authorized representative fill out the application, you can have this the legal questionnaire printed and reviewed prior to your authorized representative completing. So they have the answers to the questions in here and can sign off on your behalf. Link to this is available on the additional resources that we've listed for the application. Next slide. Again, this is a standard form, not much to explain here. You can review the form beforehand and then fill it out as part of your application. It's highly recommended that you do not submit this application for financial assistance until you can complete the certification. So, if you decide that, oh, I'm going to fill out this form later and submit the application, no, we won't be able to review it. We need you to fill out, at least give us, not at least, you must complete this and then move on to the next portion of the application and finally then submit it. Next slide. This is saying that any information that you've provided us is the right information and no false information has been provided. And there's the sentence that all applications now have. So this is not a new slide or new information to any of you. Please be sure that you do provide us with the accurate information so we can go ahead and successfully review your application. Next slide. Fee acknowledgement. Again, if you fall in the top 10% of the 2020 MRI index, you can request for a hardship waiver. If not, you can click the first option, which is basically saying that, I acknowledge to pay the $1,000 fee. The link to the 2020 MRI index is available in the application as well as in the supporting documents listed on the website. Next. If you do not qualify, then you have two options to pay the $1,000. Either, mail us a check and the information where to mail is provided in the application. And if you decide to use a credit card, then it's, a very simple online process of putting in your credit card information and paying the fee. Next slide. Electronic signature. This is basically saying that you certify and you're okay with the information that you've provided us. After this, the fee that you submit comes to us and we cannot refund it. It is a non-refundable fee. Please, once we must confirm the receipt of the application fee before the review begins. So to expedite the review process, credit cards encouraged because it's a quick transaction versus a mail check transaction. But you still have the option of sending us a mail if you prefer to do so. Next slide. Confirmation page. Please keep this confirmation page, with you. This is going to give you what your confirmation number is. If you want to follow up with us, you can refer the confirmation number, email us any questions on the Food Desert Relief at NJDEA email, or you can always call us. And then, if you are interested in learning more about any other programs, you can always visit our website to do so. Next slide. Here's a quick summary of where you can access all the information that was shared today. Our programs are regularly updated. So if you have any specific questions around the planning grant, you can visit the planning grant webpage. You can always email the customer care at njeda.com if you aren't able to find any information, or call us. We also have a new chat feature, so you can use that if you have any questions while you're into the application, into the application and have specific questions related to that. If you feel like you need to hear this information again, please join us on October 13th. We have another webinar, which is the same webinar at 11 a.m. The recording of this webinar and the next webinar will be available for you to refer to after the 13th. And again, this PowerPoint presentation will be made available on our program page shortly. Next slide. Again, quickly, I know we are at the 1 minute mark. So if you have any questions, this is how you can find us. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We want to make sure that you make the most of this planning grant. We've heard many a times that hunger has been exacerbated since COVID-19. We do have an opportunity to do something, if not a lot, with this planning grant. So let's, work towards together collectively addressing some issues, some quick fixes through the planning grant. So please, please, please reach out to us if you have any questions or if you need help with the application, technical aspects of the application. Next slide. And thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. That concludes our webinar, and if we did our best to answer many of the questions that came in through the Q&A, if we were not able to answer your question today, please continue checking our FAQ document for updates. That's where we will post all of your questions and our responses. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a wonderful day.